Hi everybody, Niall Paterson here with the Sky News Daily. Good to have you with us. Just a warning up top, on the podcast today we will be discussing issues around sexism, racism and thoughts of suicide. The topic for today, bullying in schools. But believe me, it's not what you are thinking. Rather than that which takes place in the playground, it's bullying in the staff room that we'll be discussing. Teachers bullying other teachers. And in many occasions, it is leading to staff leaving their jobs, often receiving payouts from education budgets, but with silence often as a condition. Amelia Harper is the Sky correspondent who is covering the story for us. What put you on to this? It's the scale of the problem, I think, that's interesting.
Yeah, I've spoken to over 320 teachers as part of this investigation. And I started seeing grumblings from a few teachers on social media. So then reached out to them to ask them, what it was about that they were sort of, talking about. And it just grew from there. They put me in touch with further teachers, word of mouth, it just absolutely ballooned until I had nearly one email a minute from teachers all wanting to come forward to tell their story. But crucially, many of them are very fearful of the repercussions of doing so. They wanted to come on conditions of anonymity. If we do tell their story, they must be anonymous. So it was really stark, just actually the sheer volume of people that I spoke to, and I spoke to all of them.
Well, let's just have a listen to two of those that you've been speaking to directly. As you say, we have changed their names. We're referring to them as Maya and Tracy, and we have revoiced their statements. Let's just have a listen in and hear what the problem actually is in schools for Maya and indeed for Tracy.
I'm visibly different. I'm a different colour, and obviously I think that comes with the stereotype. There was a very prominent clique in this particular school. And yeah, they would just look at me and then they would be like, curry lover. They would make a lot of joking banter, which was obviously aimed at me. Like things like, go back to your own country, like that. So I've been called the N-word quite loosely. As I was walking down the corridor and a colleague, he basically walked past me, was like, the N-word is in today.
I'd raised concerns about the courses of direction that were wanting to be taken. And if I'm really honest, I think I put a target on my back. I suppose the fact that we had a change of leadership, they didn't like the fact that I questioned the direction. It was subtle, it was insidious, felt very strongly that I was being targeted. It changed from feeling like somewhere that I wanted to be every day and that I got out of bed for, to get into a point of driving into school every day and having to stop at a location, like not far away from the school, to get my head together and stop myself from feeling sick.
A senior member of staff, he would make remarks, would say, you've got blowjob lips. I had PTSD. I have had a lot of counselling, and it's been difficult.
As part of your exit, you had to sign a non-disclosure agreement. How did that make you feel signing that document?
Worthless, sad, and in fact suicidal. Completely voiceless. Yeah, worthless, to be honest. I'd worked so hard to get where I was in the profession, and it was just sad that, a head teacher couldn't take my complaint seriously and do something about the real issues, and would rather pay me a sum of money to keep quiet and just leave the area.
It did leave me at the very lowest, darkest place that I could possibly be. I was suicidal. With a child at home, and fundamentally that led me to having to make a decision that was best for my mental health, which was to get out. Fundamentally, I was manipulated with the threat of something which is called a support plan, but it's not a support plan. It's code for you don't fit, we want you out. It was like an explosion went off inside me because I knew that was the beginning of the end of my career. If you're put on a support plan, usually it's very challenging targets and it's the precursor to formal capability. And as a teacher, as with any profession, the mention of capability is something that is very frightening because it signals potentially the end of your career. And it's used as leverage to get people in a moment to think, if there's a support plan, I've really got no choice here. To be told that you need a plan to sit around you to enable you to do a job properly that you've been doing for so long, it just made me feel completely and utterly inadequate. And to then question how I could have been doing that same job for so long. And the way I phrased it in my own head was, how have I got away with this for so long? If I am inadequate, how has nobody noticed until now? And it just caused me to question everything I believed about myself and my effectiveness and who I was. It left me feeling suicidal and needed to seek medical intervention for that. It left me with massive feelings of guilt for the children that I had to walk away from and the colleagues that I'd worked with for a very long time, for whom I was suddenly not there and I wasn't able to talk to them.
I suppose we should say at this point, it's important to stress that Maya and Tracy are not by any means isolated examples of this.
Absolutely not. As part of this investigation, when I went back to every single teacher, I said, are you willing to give us a quote or some written testimony that you would be happy for us to share? And we had over 200 of those 320 teachers who have given absolutely heartbreaking testimony. There really is no other way of explaining it.
What many people will be thinking right now, because I certainly am, is that this is almost unbelievable that we would not send our children to a school environment in which bullying, racism, sexism, threats of violence were taking place. To discover that this is happening in the staff room, that this is happening amongst the teachers. Why are there not processes in place, HR processes in place to deal with this sort of thing?
Must stress, it is not in 100% of schools, but it appears very widespread given the number of teachers that have come forward. They are directing this behaviour towards the teaching staff. Many of the teachers have said they've tried to whistleblow to the management within their schools. They have said that they've come up against issues doing so. They have not fundamentally felt safe to do so. When they have raised concerns or complaints about the ways they've been treated, those were met with cynicism. They were not dealt with properly, and they just fundamentally felt unsafe and unable to do so.
And again, in many occasions, teachers are being given a payout when they leave.
Yeah.
But this is 2 points to make. One, money that presumably comes from education budgets to pay teachers, to pay teachers off. But it's also coming with non-disclosure agreements as well, NDAs.
Yeah, I think this is probably one of the most worrying aspects of this investigation that I've sort of looked at and have found, because as part of this, 119 of those teachers say that they signed a non-disclosure agreement at the end of a settlement process, once, bullying processes or bullying complaints had been, in inverted commas, resolved. We calculate as part of this investigation, and you alluded to this when it comes to money, we calculate that this would cost over £1.73 million. And fundamentally, this is taxpayers' money. This is money for schools, for schools'
budgets are tight at the moment.
For school budgets, for books, for, I suppose, teacher wellbeing, whatever the school wants to use that money that they have for. Instead, it's crucially being paid for teachers to leave. And this is why you have...
Well, leave and shut up as well.
Yes, leave and... they say, in their words, gagged and silenced. And one of the other problems with the use of non-disclosure agreements is that when a teacher wants to move on to their next job, they need to have a reference, usually from the head teacher. And what is often tied up within all these confidentiality clauses is the fact that if you sign this, we will give you a satisfactory reference so you can move on without an issue if you want to. So teachers felt that in order to secure a reference to ensure that they then could go on to future employment, they felt they hadn't got any choice to sign it. And the payouts range from low thousands to tens of thousands of pounds. And this is compensation that teachers feel doesn't mean anything ultimately because their lives have been ruined by this.
I mean, are we seeing teachers leaving the profession because of this?
Yeah, absolutely. And a huge number of the teachers that we spoke to said that they are going to be leaving or have left because of this. And I think it points to a wider problem when it comes to, teaching and schools in a bit of a crisis point when it comes to teacher retention and recruitment. And actually, I think recruitment comes up a lot in general discussions about what's going wrong in schools. But teachers in this investigation have been telling me actually retention is a really just as big an issue. Because if you're not treating the teachers right, they will just leave. And I think fundamentally, if you don't care about teachers, you probably care about children. You probably care about children within schools being supported by staff that are happy. And the knock-on impact is unhappy teachers will be then teaching children. That's not the best environment.
And here's the thing, Amelia. I mean, even your story is hot off the presses today, but already you are getting other teachers contacting us with their story.
I've already had lots of emails from teachers saying they've had to sign an NDA as well. I didn't feel like I could, reach out at any point sooner because I felt so overwhelmed by everything that I've gone through. Something that sticks in my mind just now is an email that came in less than an hour ago with a teacher saying that they were in this position and wanted to end their life just the other week. So it's obvious that the people that I have spoken to are, 320 plus people, but there are more. There are more, and more could come of this. And if anyone is listening and does want to get in touch with me about this, then you can absolutely do that.
Well, Amelia, you mentioned the National Education Union. We are going to be speaking to them after the break. For you, though, thanks very much indeed. Stay where you are. When we come back, we will be speaking to Phil Clarke, the NEU president, himself a teacher. Welcome back to The Daily, where we are continuing to talk about this very surprising phenomenon, teachers being bullied by other teachers. We mentioned him before the break. Phil Clarke is the National Education Union president, himself a teacher. Phil, good to have you with us. We've just been speaking to Amelia Harper, our correspondent, who has done this story literally just a handful of minutes ago. I just bumped into her and she told me that since we published this story, we have now had, in addition to the 300 plus teachers that she has already spoken to, another close to 100 teachers getting in touch to talk about their experiences. I'm just getting the impression that this might be a tip of the iceberg situation.
I think you'd be right. The level and the number of teachers who are leaving the profession because of the culture in schools, how they've been treated, the lack of professional respect, it is a significant problem. I think there is a systemic problem with a move towards a very managerial culture, a move towards quite a corporate culture, but without the normal sort of safeguarding and professionalism and all that goes with that you'd hope to find in most corporate environments. It really is about, I think, over quite a number of years now, less and less teachers are seen as professionals who understand their class and understand what their class need. That lack of professionalism and lack of professional respect, I think, goes hand in hand with a culture that says it's okay to just push people out. You don't need to provide support. You don't actually often need to really be able to justify why you think their underperformance is happening. Just replace and get someone new in.
Give me a flavour then, if you can, Phil, of what your members are telling you about the nature of the bullying. I mean, can we generalise, or are we talking about sexism, misogyny, racism? Are we talking across the board bullying, or can we be specific? Can we generalise? It's
difficult to generalise. There are a lot of schools out there that are run well. I would like to say it's a good majority, but I don't think there's a clear enough picture on what's going on in what is a very fragmented and ever-changing school system. Often, actually, it's women who are harder hit by this. It's women who are more experienced in their careers. Perhaps, I think often that's because they're more likely to push back against management and say, we don't think the way you want us to teach these children is the right way for them. So I think there's definitely an element there of women being hit harder. It wouldn't surprise me at all to find that also, I think, black teachers are more likely to be pushed out in this regard. And I think that would match the sort of things we see as a trade union in supporting our members. And this is a pattern we see quite often. 20 or 30 years, no problems raised. Suddenly, a manager says, I didn't like the 10 minutes I saw of that lesson. You're now on a road to a process that could see you not just out of your job, but with a reference that says that you were a failing teacher.
This is the support plan process.
That's devastating for people to hear. That's devastating because not only obviously does it threaten livelihoods and careers long term, It's basically saying what you have really valued and what you see that the contributions you make to the children in your class. Actually, we don't think any of that's good enough. Now, obviously, there are teachers out there who are struggling. They need support. And some of them, it's probably not the right job for them. That is, of course, a factor. But it is very difficult to justify how somebody can have been doing a job with no concerns raised for decades, and then suddenly they are so poor they have to be managed out. You couldn't divorce it from the academisation process, the privatisation of our school system. That's introduced a very corporate culture. There's a culture of fear. So then the head teacher has to be seen to be dealing with problem staff rather than actually understanding that schools are collaborative efforts. They will go through peaks and troughs, and what they need is support, backup, investment, rather than just punishment.
I mean, another alarming aspect of Amelia's investigation has been the use, or perhaps even you might describe it as misuse, of non-disclosure agreements, that in cases where teachers are adjudged to have been bullied and are deserving of some form of compensation, conditional on receiving that compensation is that they sign a document that says they can never talk about it. Now, that can't be positive.
Unfortunately, in the system we've got, they've become a bit of a necessary evil because we're trying to protect the ability of that staff member to go on and have a career elsewhere, to be able to, and it's very common that somebody who's pushed out of one school thrives in another because actually their performance wasn't fundamentally the problem. So the NDAs become about protecting their ability to do that. So simply one head teacher or one member of management or one executive from a multi-academy trust can't effectively end someone's career. So references and things are covered by NDAs. So they become a necessary evil, but it is problematic because nobody's keeping track of this. Nobody's keeping track of the amount of public money that's been spent on it. Nobody's keeping track of the amount of support plans and the amount of teachers leaving who then go on to be successful somewhere else, raising questions about whether there was a problem in the first place. And nobody's keeping proper track of how many just simply leave the profession because they don't want to ever be treated like that again.
I mean, I'm sitting here as a parent, and I'm wondering why any parent would have any confidence that their child would not be bullied in a school environment where teachers are complaining that senior management team, colleagues are doing the same, if not worse, to them.
It's an interesting point. Yeah, the culture in some schools is really difficult. One thing I absolutely know that our members always strive to do is prevent this spilling over to impacting on the students. And again, the majority of managers, absolutely put the children first. But it is a concern if bullying is allowed to happen amongst the staff who are adults and professionals. What confidence can you have that bullying is taken seriously amongst the students? It is a concern, but it's very difficult to be sure about how much crossover there is.
In response to our investigation, Education Minister Catherine McKinnell said all school staff should feel safe and supported at work and confident in being able to report concerns, and we expect school leaders as employers to take appropriate action to tackle any issues that are raised. For our part, we're determined to reset the relationship with education workforces so together we can drive high and rising standards across our schools. We've also worked in partnership with the education sector and mental health experts to create the Education Staff Wellbeing Charter and encourage schools to sign up as a shared commitment to promote staff wellbeing.
Well, that's your lot for this edition of The Daily. If you've been affected by any of the issues we have been discussing, you can always speak to the Samaritans. They're on phone number 116123, or you can email Joe, that's J-O, at samaritans.org. And if you're a teacher or you know a teacher who's experienced some of the problems that Amelia and Phil were discussing, just head to skynews.com. You'll be able to find the article and the email by which you can get in touch. We'll see you same time tomorrow.